Hello, welcome to my channel and welcome to this series called Cosy Ghost Stories. Telling chilling tales by fire has been around for millennia, and at this channel we aim to embrace that tradition, if somewhat a little differently. So if I were you, I would go grab myself a drink, dim the lights and settle in for some Cosy Ghost Stories. But before you do, did your curtains just twitch? Oh, maybe it was just a trick of the light. These stories that I'm about to tell come from a specific article that I found online. I will link it in the description below. This first story comes from AXWW19. I was in my room writing in my journal before bed. It was a bit later and my parents were asleep. Most lights in the house were off, except for a little desk lamp. All of a sudden, this figure stood in front of me, and I couldn't breathe. It only lasted maybe 5 seconds, but as soon as I could move, I ran to the bathroom and locked the door. When I did, I heard footsteps immediately leave my room and the door gently closed behind. I stayed in that bathroom for an hour at least. It still scares me to this day. This next story comes from MF Cat. So, I was actually the reason my parents are believers now, and I still get chills whenever my mum or dad tells a story. A lot of odd things happened building up to this, but this is the big one. I was only 1 year old, and I was sleeping in between them. But when they woke up, I wasn't in the bed anymore. They searched everywhere for me, and said that when they finally looked under the bed, they found me underneath it, directly in the middle where I'd been sleeping up top. They have no idea how I got there, and it completely spooked them. This story comes from Melodic Quality. A couple years ago, I was still living with my parents. I was upstairs in my bedroom hanging out in my room and watching TV. I was on the phone with my friend at the time, and I exited my room and went downstairs to have a cigarette. The only person in my parents' house that day was my dad, who later I found out was asleep in his room on the main level. Anyway, I was gone for about 7 minutes, and I walked back upstairs and entered my bedroom. I was still on the phone, and I walked toward my bed and sat down. After 20 seconds or so, I glanced back up to play my TV, and there at the end of my bed was a piece of paper sticking up from the base. I just remember not understanding what I was seeing, and never in my life have I so quickly dropped dead silent. I just remember saying, "Nate?" and he kept saying, "What? What?" and I could hardly speak. I quickly said I'll call him back and immediately took out my phone and took a picture. It was an old economics paper of mine talking about the government and the divide our two-party system creates in America. I wrote this econ paper 3 years prior. There were originally 2 pages to it, but it was missing its second page. The edges of the page were burnt, and there was a big yellow triangle that almost looked like it was highlighted smack dab in the middle of the page. It almost looked luminescent. It absolutely scared the fuck out of me. That paper had to have been in my closet, stacked away with all my other paperwork. And now it was ripped from the other page and was placed at the edge of my bed, sticking upright for me to see. I was gone for only 7 minutes. Nobody could have done that. This story comes from Waste. When I was younger, I lived in a small house that was really dark and quiet at night. I always woke up around midnight most nights and would look for something to eat in the kitchen. So one night, as per usual, I woke up and went to grab the first slice of bread from the new bread my mum bought that day. The kitchen is completely dark besides the 2 small windows that were fogged so no one could look in. There was this small corner around my fridge that was just dark, like darker than the rest of the kitchen, even when the light was hitting it. However, I was partially asleep, so I didn't think much of it. So when I went to grab the slice of bread, something hit me in the face. I went to wipe it off my face, and all I felt were these long, long fingers. I was terrified and ran back to my room, and as I ran, I could hear and feel something chasing me, and I could hear all kinds of things falling behind me as I ran back to my room frightened. When I got to my room, I shut my door and felt my eye, and it was bleeding. To this day I have a scar. Never have I encountered something that terrifying again. This story comes from Mermaid Kimberly. The earliest memory I have is of an experience with an apparition. Based on what I know, I was no more than 3 years old when I saw it. My parents believed me and always had some explanation for me. We moved houses and tiny things would happen here and there, but once again, my parents always chalked it up to an overactive imagination. Fast forward to getting married, moving into an old apartment, and things starting to heat up a little bit. Bins would get flipped over and the contents dumped on the floor. Then we moved in with my in-laws while my husband went to school. Cue the real events. The house would go through periods of high activity, particularly centred around me. My husband said he would hear me calling him from another room, but I wouldn't be calling him. He would see me pass by the bottom of the stairs as he was coming down and would follow me all the way around the corner into the far room, only to dead end with the room empty. Here's the main story. My husband was working nights and I was home alone on the farm while the in-laws were out of state on a trip. One of the dogs goes into an episode, staring at nothing in the middle of the living room, absolutely losing it. Rabid dog. I can't get her to calm down. Usually, a light touch on the back will snap her out of it, but I could not cool her off this time. I finally go to my room to take a breather, and I hear her stop. Maybe 15 minutes later, she's at it again. I go halfway up the stairs and I'm talking to her through the banister, finally getting her to come over to me and stop barking. She keeps looking next to me at the top of the stairs, then a huge slam on the baby gate there happens, rattling the gate and the banister. I ignore it because I've heard that's the best thing to do when something's right next to you. The dog barks, but I get her to stop again. Then right in my line of sight, I see a pen slip forcefully off the table, flying multiple feet before hitting the ground. The dog immediately runs to attack and goes into another fit, looking at something next to the table. I start to lose it and immediately go back downstairs to my bedroom. I sit on my bed next to my cat napping there. He stands up and comes to me since I'm upset and crying. I hear the dog move back to barking in the living room, closer to my room. A minute later, my cat turns to look at the doorway. His back raises up, ears pinged back, and his hair stands on end looking straight at the doorway. I ran out of the house at that point. That was the worst it ever got. With what I know about the experiences through my life compared with where I was staying, I've kind of begun to think I might be a poltergeist. This story comes from Moist Worm Power. My childhood home was notoriously haunted. We moved into the house when I was around 6 and my brother was 3. It started slow with him and I seeing weird things at night and constant nightmares. Things would go missing only to return a few days later. We would constantly hear people talking, footsteps, and doors slamming when no one was around. Over the years, though, it started to escalate. One parent was in their bedroom during a party when they heard a child running and the door to their walk-in closet creaked shut. She assumed it was me or my brother and went to open up the door. When she did, some of the t-shirts that were hung close to the door were swaying. Peeking out from behind them was a little girl she did not know. The little girl vanished before her eyes. Another story. I was home alone waiting for my boyfriend to come over. I heard him call my name, so I came out of my bedroom and headed toward the front door. When I came to the stairs that separated my room from the front door, I saw this thing. It almost resembled a person, pitch black, crawling up the stairs. It cracked its neck to look up at me, and I ran. I called my boyfriend, and he wasn't there yet. I hid in my room until he came. This story comes from One Dividend. This happened when I was 11, visiting a lighthouse in Michigan, which was supposedly haunted by a boy. My parents wanted to take a tour with the tour guide, but I wanted to play outside, considering we had been touring various sites in the Upper Peninsula that day. No one was around, so my parents ended up letting me play outside the lighthouse while they took a quick tour. As I played outside, a really beat-up ball rolled up to my feet. I bent over to pick it up, and as I stood back up, I saw a boy standing next to the edge of the lighthouse looking at me. I assumed the ball was his, so I tossed it over to him, and he wandered away. I didn't think anything about it, but when my parents were done with the tour, they asked what I did. I told them something along the lines of, I was just wandering around. Oh, and I helped this kid get his ball back. The tour guide was with my parents, and when I mentioned the kid, he looked startled because, as I mentioned earlier, there was no one other than us at the lighthouse. Only 3 cars. My parents' car, the tour guide's car, and the car belonging to the person at the front desk. The tour guide asked me to take a look at a picture in the lighthouse. I know this sounds super cliche, but when he showed me the picture, it was the picture of the exact same boy with the exact same beat-up ball. Apparently that kid died at the lighthouse. On a side note, we checked around, and there was no boy. So you might be asking me, why was this creepy? Especially considering that the boy never scared me or tried to scare me. What creeps me out is that I touched the ball. When it comes to ghost stories, most people only report a ghost, not other objects. Assuming that was a ghost with his ball, what the heck did I touch? Also, it felt solid, like a real ball. If it was a ghost ball, then how the heck do you explain what I touched? It still bothers me to this day. This story comes from Snoo3341. We were taking a tour of the battleship Massachusetts in Falls River for my girlfriend's 30th birthday. She wanted to do scary stuff, and I wanted to see museums, so we stayed at the Lizzie Borden house and the next night at the Shanley Hotel. I didn't personally feel any definitive paranormal activity at each location, but there were definitely signs. The one place I actually wanted to go that wasn't meant to have any paranormal activity was the ship. While we were touring the bathroom/cafeteria area, I was snipping around the shower, just curious, when I got tapped on the shoulder. Think it was my girlfriend. I turned around, but no one was there. She was a few rooms away, and we were the only 2 people in the area. Nothing was hanging above me or leaking. The area was a little cool, and it just felt as if a human just touched me on the shoulder, and I am 100% certain it happened. I found it ironic considering the other places we had been were known for their ghost activity. This next story comes from Kangarooan. My best friend came to visit me, and this being South Africa, was waiting at the security gate of our house to let him in. He was calling my name and I was on the toilet. We both hear my dad saying, "He's on the toilet, he'll be right there." My blood froze. My father wasn't home. We had no idea what to make of it. This next story comes from Cheetah-san87. I'm from Indonesia, where paranormal activities are quite normal here, but then I had this one disturbing experience. One day I went into my uncle's home in Geneva. He loves collecting statues or historical stuff. Then I was asked to take out the trash that day, and I went to the basement where his office/room is at. It's a small room, like 2 by 3 meters. Then somehow I saw a statue of a goddess with 4 or 6 arms, and the aura in that room just suddenly cold. There were 4 rooms in the basement, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, an office room, and a storage room. Somehow, after I grabbed all of the trash, I couldn't find the stairs to go back. It's gone. Literally gone. I was quite panicked, and then I smelled some strange scent, like an ancient flower. I went into the office room, and I spoke to the statue. "Hey, I am sorry if I disturbed you in a way I cannot imagine. I need to go back upstairs, okay? Just let me go." Then after that, I can see the stairs again. But after that, it took me years to be able to go to any basements. This story comes from JSS Kana. A close family friend had been in a coma for a few weeks before his death and wasn't allowed visitors. Not sure if that was his family's choice or the hospital's policy. I was about 3 at the time. So my parents hadn't been able to visit him before he passed. In our house, we would always leave the hallway light on. It hung near the bottom of the stairs. The morning after he passed, the light was off. My mother spotted it before me. On first glance, she thought the bulb had just blown out, but then she noticed that it had been removed from the light and placed carefully on the stairs on a higher step than it would have been had it somehow fallen. My mother believes this was his way of saying goodbye before he went. This story comes from Wow, I'm Tired. I have a ghost of a boy who died in the 20s in my room, and he literally steals things from plain sight when you look away and then they're gone. And the only way to get that object back is to politely ask him for it. It then appears either somewhere that was already searched multiple times before, or it's placed somewhere it's physically impossible to get to. And this last story comes from Minimal. One night, my grandmother was looking after me, and it was just the two of us in the house. I was sitting on the floor in front of her while we were watching TV. Suddenly, we heard loud footsteps upstairs. Then one of the doors slammed shut. I grabbed onto her leg because I was horrified that someone was in the house, but my grandma just looked up at the ceiling and yelled, "Don't slam any doors in my house!" I never got to talk to her about it since she passed when I was still young, so I'll never know who she was talking to. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you did enjoy this video, then please be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps me out. If you would like to hear more of these sort of stories, then please do subscribe to my Patreon, where for just a few dollars a month you can find extra ghost stories that I have compiled in my own personal collection over the years. Again, the article where I found these ghost stories are linked in the description below. If you have any ghost stories of your own which you would like for me to read out, please do not hesitate to contact me, either through my email address, which is lauriengaminguk@gmail.com, or you can contact me via social media. Again, all the links are down below. And on that note, stay safe, thank you for listening, and I shall see you in the next one. Oh, and sweet dreams.